Hey, I'm Alan Furstenberg,
And I'm John Gillilan,
and welcome to Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs.
Hey, John, how you doing?
Hey Alan, nice to see you. It's been a minute. I guess we talked like nine months ago or so now. So time is flying.
Time's always flying. Funny how that happens. Yeah, it's been about 9 months. It is great to have you back on as both as guest host and as the official Two Voice Devs Apple correspondent. Um,
Honored.
and 9 months ago, we had you on to talk about what was going on with Apple and Apple Intelligence that they had just announced, and was starting to give information out about. And we wanted to have you back on because Apple's WWDC, their Worldwide Developer Conference, just wrapped up. Um, Ton of stuff. I know I watched the keynote, and yeah, there was a lot of talk about their new liquid glass interface. That seemed to be the highlight of everything. But
Yeah.
every so often, I'd see them talk about a new feature, and it would say, and available through Apple Intelligence. So sounds like there was some stuff going on. Uh, what was
Yeah, they're
WWDC like from your perspective?
well, you know, I'm I'm newer to the Apple community. So when I joined, it was still a little COVID-y out there. And, you know, when uh when the pandemic happened, Apple shifted to a virtual sort of pre-recorded keynote, and they're very polished, cinematic, um,
Very, very, yes.
and they've stuck with that, even as it seems like some of the other keynotes have gone back to in person. They're still just
Hmm.
producing these videos. Every year, though, they have a lottery now to be able to go to an event at Apple Park in Cupertino, and uh, it's I don't know the number of people they let in. It's not super large, and most people, myself included, are used to throwing my hat in the ring and getting denied. But this year I got a pass, so I decided to go down,
Oh,
and it was a much different experience than just sitting at home binge watching session videos and trying to wrap my head around everything.
oh
Um,
yeah, I can
I,
imagine.
yeah, you're you're a Google I/O, it seems like you go almost every year. How long have you been doing that?
I This was my 10th Google I/O.
Wow.
I've
Okay.
been I've been doing it for most years since 2012. 2012 was my first year. Um,
And
and I/O is different. I/O is different. It's more like a party than anything else. You know,
interesting.
I don't know if WWDC had or still has that same kind of atmosphere.
Well, one thing that's interesting about it is a lot more people come to Cupertino that week from the indie community than uh, have passes to the actual event. So there's a couple hotels just south of their campus, and there's several like parallel indie conferences that
Huh.
that people show up and go to anyway. So there's like there's a lot of great community energy sort of on the peripheral of it, and a lot of the official stuff was only for a couple days, but I stayed for the whole week, and you get a different uh kind of experience, like getting outside of the polish of the mothership. You know what I mean?
Very interesting. So what was it like though on the mothership?
Well, so back to the video thing, like they're back to these in-person events, but you're still you're still watching the video of the keynote you produced. Tim Cook and Craig Federighi, the head of software, like they come out as actual humans right before and say hi. But then, they disappear and you just sit there watching a video. So it's a bit odd. The real value of it comes from, uh, you know, in the the time between videos, as well as in the afternoon,
Yeah.
there's pretty much all the folks that are in the various pre-recorded bits, as well as their team members, designers and engineers. They're all there. So like there's some structured time where you can sort of find the people that you're most interested in talking to. There was also a couple in-person labs, so I got a chance to sit down with some folks from the accessibility design team, as well as the broader design team, and actually you know look at my project and get feedback and ask questions on it. Whereas some of the other opportunities are to try and just ask broader questions to get understanding about all the stuff you just watched. Last year's WWDC, Apple made this major push into AI, and they branded it as Apple Intelligence. And it was a good I think it was like 40 minutes of their main keynote.
Mm-hmm.
And the most interesting set of features related to that were around a more personalized Siri and more personal context, and being able to take action across apps. And they punted on that and said, well, that's coming in a software update later on. And so when you and I spoke last year, it was a lot of that conversation was unpacking the hypotheticals of how some of that stuff would play out. And the expectation was that stuff would ship by April of this year. But as that came and went, it started to feel a little fishy. And at some point, several months ago, I don't know if you if this was on your radar, but they basically proactively came out and said, you know what, all that stuff we promised you last year, it's not going to ship in this release cycle.
Huh.
And we don't know when it's going to ship. So that was a pretty major moment for them. It's very atypical of Apple to pre-announce stuff that doesn't ship. And so thinking back to last summer and the climate in the broader industry, there seemed to be a lot of pressure on
do
Apple
something.
Yeah, to show up and finally say, no, we're not behind. Here's what we're working on. Here's our AI story. And they did that last summer in a convincing way, but having to walk it back was not great. not a good look.
And to be fair, they weren't the only ones that were convinced to do that. Amazon Amazon as a whole was convinced, look, you need to at least, look like you're showing. And they did, and it fell flat on its face. And then they did again, and it fell flat on its face. And then they said, really, we've got this Alexa Plus thing coming.
Yeah.
And that's still very, very slowly leaking out.
Totally. I think maybe one difference between Apple and Amazon is that Alexa at least was always seen to be ahead of where Siri was. So, Siri really needed to catch up, and it seemed like it was finally happening. And so anyway, that was sort of the energy going into this year's WWDC. There was this cloud of like, wow, how are they going to address this, if at all? Is there going to be some spin? And the cynical take on liquid glass is that they were saying, hey, look over here. But that I don't really buy that. that's like the timeline of redesigning all your platforms like
Yeah.
they did,
No.
like doesn't get shoehorned in as a right. So, but you know,
I mean,
to
I think the counter argument about liquid glass, about how it's this radical and bold new design that they have prepared to pave the way for everyone having Vision Pro. I also think that's a bit overblown. I don't think they thought that far ahead.
yeah, I have a beta with liquid glass running on one of my test phones. There's some things that are cool about it. I'm sure it's gonna improve a lot over the summer before they ship. But you know, that that really wasn't the interesting part of WWDC. You know, first of all, they started the keynote by addressing the elephant in the room and owning the fact that they didn't ship this stuff and
Mm.
said that it didn't meet their quality bar, and there was some vagaries about it shipping at some point in the coming year. That being said, there were a number of AI related announcements that were super interesting. Um,
Okay.
one, as an aside, like something that you picked up on, you mentioned at the beginning, as opposed to, sort of cordoning off Apple Intelligence into its own section, there were a lot of product features sprinkled throughout all their operating systems that they're, putting under the umbrella of Apple Intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, those those are what they are. They're going to continue to get better. There's some basic developer stories around some of that stuff to be able to fly in system views of writing tools or the image playground stuff into your app if that's relevant. But by and large, a lot of that stuff was more just sort of first party operating system, new feature stuff. But the most interesting part of the announcements were around a new framework they're calling the foundation models framework. And
Very interesting. Okay.
yeah, they sort of tease this in the proper keynote, but there's a second sort of geekier keynote in the afternoon that day called the State of the Union. And that's where they get into it a little bit more. And then there's session videos where you really sort of get in the weeds, and all that stuff is free and on YouTube. And so it's worth checking out if it's interesting to you, and scrubbing around a little bit. But you know the 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 long and the short of the foundations model framework is that they're opening up programmatic access for third-party developers to the on-device LLM that's powering all of the first-party stuff.
Okay.
And there's certainly some limitations there. I'm not an expert by any means on sort of the sort of mechanics of different models, but it's a 3 billion parameter model, so it can run locally. And I know in the scheme of things, of kind of the server side state of the art, that's quite small. The positives are that it's baked into the operating system. It's there already. There's nothing for developers to deal with in terms of making the model compatible, or getting the assets and bundling it with their app. All those things are possible, but they're not great for a lot of apps because it's just more overhead. But in this case, you can do a lot of really interesting things. The At a basic level, you set up a session and you can set up some instructions which are hidden from the user, just as like sort of the first level prompt.
Uh-huh.
And then from there you can pass in you can pass in strings and get responses. There's a concept of statefulness, so you can have hops back and forth within a limited context window, similar concepts to anywhere else. But one,
and I think this is a clever approach in saying that we're going to make a standard way to access an on-device LLM on the Apple OS platforms. And Google has done similar on Android and in Chrome. And it makes sense that all of these are ending up starting with their own model, just to say, here's an interface. It's now a standard interface. You'll be able to access it however. But that also means that now gets attention, and it means that it gets used. It means that it gets improved because people are pushing for it to get improved. And as it gets improved in one place, it gets improved for a lot of,
totally.
So everybody wins.
One of the most interesting things to me about the framework, and I'm curious to hear from you how how this manifests on the Google side or elsewhere that you're familiar with, but there's sort of two buckets of response types. One is just strings, just getting text back, but you can also get structured data back based on the data models that you've created for your app. They have a macro they're calling Generable, and so you can say you can put that on your existing Swift types and say I want the model's output in these instances to be constrained, and the model will return Swift types that your app is already built around. You're not dealing with getting JSON back and then making sure that it's formed correctly and that no keys are hallucinated. So that solves a lot of pain points there in a lot of use cases.
That's very, very nice. I don't actually know if Google is doing that or not, because I haven't dug deeply into Google's approach to this. But that is a brilliant approach to tie it so closely to Swift and to that API, so that you are taking advantage of the LLM for something that it's really good at, and yet tying to the rest of your code very, very tightly. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it's not like LLMs aren't doing this sort of thing in general. And, you do see libraries like LangChain that will constrain it to a particular type. And that, and I think Spring AI for Java, for example, does something similar, where you're defining types and then you're constraining it to those types for your LLM calls. And there are various things that are enforcing it. But tying it that well and that closely to Swift is just brilliant. It's a brilliant move.
Yeah, I agree. When I was watching the sessions that go deeper on that, I was even more impressed by it because there's a number of affordances to be able to put both natural language sort of prompts at the parameter level on your Swift types, as well as some affordances for constraints and stuff.
Oh, so nice.
So you can really sort of massage each property at the data model level, and the output is going to honor that. So that's super cool. There's also a concept that in that framework that they're calling tools. So basically you can create these tools and register them with your LLM session. And those tools can basically do anything you want. The 3 billion parameter model is, fixed in time when it was trained. They explicitly say, this is not a world knowledge model. It shouldn't be used for that. And
that's good. I mean, I've expressed opinion that painting our LLMs as world knowledge models is a mistake. They're language models, and we should use them that way.
Yeah.
So that's good to hear.
And so this tool functionality um is super powerful because you can basically register these tools, and they can either query your app's data store, or make a network call for some pertinent, timely information. So um, I haven't um, I haven't played with these APIs yet, but it seems like there's a couple of really kind of powerful features that help you sort of get more out of this constrained local model than you might otherwise get.
And just to make sure, and so tools and function calls are a pretty standard model on large
Totally.
language models these days. It's a good question. I'm not actually sure just how well tuned the local models for Android Chrome are. That's an interesting question. But just to make sure I follow this correctly. So what you're doing is you're defining in Swift a Swift function or method or whatever the right term is in Swift, and giving it to the LLM saying, here's what this function can do, and here are the parameters that it takes. But you're defining that all in Swift itself.
Totally.
Very nice.
Yep. And so it's still abstracted from the developer, like if that tool gets used, but
Oh, sure.
but
Yeah,
presumably, if you've set it up right, in the context of your app and how you've implemented the feature, it should it should fire to it. So I'm really excited to explore that.
That's a really exciting feature. One of the things I'll be curious to hear about is how many tools you can define and have them well managed, because that's a problem that some of the bigger models still have. You give them more than 10, 15 tools and it begins to flake out a little bit.
Interesting.
I should also say that this was one of the things that I beat Google up for, is that this tool concept is very much being it's kind of the foundation that Anthropic's model context protocol is built on top of. And it was the perfect opportunity for Google to say, here's how we're doing MCP for Android. And I feel like that's what Apple just said as well, without using those terms.
Yeah, totally. One other piece on that foundation model framework that I think is interesting, they sort of cordoned this off and we're like, this is an advanced use case and we really don't recommend it. But if you want to do this at a lower level, you can actually train what they are calling an adapter for your use case to actually, fine tune the weights of that LLM. And something they talked about last year was, all of these system Apple Intelligence features, like, they've created an adapter for, summarization and tone change and these different things. And
I was about to say, this sounded vaguely familiar from last year.
Yeah, but that there was no developer story around that. That was just, their implementation on their side. And some of this future series stuff, presumably will have adapters that they've trained for the different domains in which it's expected to work. So being able to create your own adapters is also potentially a big deal. But the downside of that is that when you create an adapter, it's tied, it's bound to that version of the model. And as soon as the model is updated, that adapter falls on its face. And the on-device models are not tied to the operating system release cycles. Those are over the air updates that
boy.
So,
Well, so
that I don't know how you navigate that, but they're starting to lay the groundwork for some more powerful use cases.
but I guess at the same time, have they laid the groundwork for model versioning so that, my application is now tied to this version of the model, even though it's been updated a few times. And eventually they're going to say, we're giving up on that old model,
Yeah.
upgrade or die, but
Yeah.
that they support some version history.
I don't know the answer to that. My hunch is that for now, like that might be totally abstracted away. But I don't really I don't know how the custom adapter approach would be
I don't
viable
even, I don't even just mean
without.
for the, I don't even just mean for the custom adapter. I mean for anything. Because one of the things that we've seen is, if I went from, Gemma 2 to Gemma 3 or Gemini 1.5 to Gemini 2,
Yeah.
the model behaves differently.
Yeah, totally. Well, even back in our Alexa and Google Assistant days, like
Oh, yeah.
that was completely hidden from us. And so the polish and duct tape that we would do to get uh, an action or a skill working properly, had a shelf life on it, and they would update their language models, and then suddenly it didn't work anymore. So,
I,
you know,
I guess that's my, I guess that's my question or my, I don't know. That's one of the things that I want to know about all of these models, not just, for Apple is, what's the lifespan on this? And how do I know that,
mm,
what I'm building now is going to work in 6 months? And I
mm,
realize I honestly don't think that the companies that are putting these models out have an answer to that yet, because the AI teams have never thought about having to productize their AI before.
mm,
They've never had a thought think about the fact that, of course everyone's going to want the latest model and we'll upgrade to the latest version when we put a new one out in 3 months, right? Well, no. I mean, I'd love to, but that now puts me on a treadmill for a development cycle that I don't
mm.
necessarily have.
um, so that's the foundation models framework. That's the chunkiest update, but there's a number of other things I wanted to mention.
Okay.
Um, there's there's a speech framework, which is text to speech. It's been around since iOS 10, I think, and it's the consensus on it is that it's been sort of stagnant and kind of janky. They refreshed that this year with a modernized on-device speech to text model that's supposedly performs better for long form audio and things like that. So
Hang on.
um,
Speech to text or text to speech?
speech to text, ASR.
Okay. Awesome. Because you would originally start by saying text to speech and then, okay.
Oh, I jumbled my
Right.
my
As long
TTS.
as we're clear about, so
Yeah,
the speech to text, very impressive. So, and that's working on device and a lot better now.
yeah, that's a separate framework, but there are some interesting pieces here now to say, okay, like could you record audio in your app, get a really great transcription, and pass it into this foundation models framework and start to build uh uh you know there I'm excited to try that too. Another system feature is they're calling visual intelligence, which Google's had for so long, I feel like.
10 years.
Yeah, for sure. So you know they they're building that into the camera as well as the ability to get to that interface on a screenshot or a photo that you have. um, the developer story here is that the framework that is the bridge to all this future Siri stuff. um, you can sort of build some connective tissue between your app intents and your app entities. So the system has an understanding of what your app does and what kinds of content models it works with. And that can be exposed in the visual intelligence search interface. I was thinking of a use case for my art app, for example. Someone could be in a museum, open their camera to a painting, and the visual intelligence interface would come up, and there's a way for my app to get the data buffer of that image and do a search and return the app entity, which is my app's structured representation of that piece in the search interface. And if you tap that, it would bring you to, that part of my app. Is there something like that on the Android side where you can sort of tie into Google
Not that
Lens
I'm
or
aware
whatever
of,
they're calling it?
because that's all. I mean, that's been part of Google Photos for ages, and it's only recently that we've seen the models open up that do the same sorts of things. So we see the embeddings abilities are out there now. But I'm not aware of it actually being part of something that's in Android's API itself.
Well, this is another example where your app's Swift types are being returned to the system.
Yeah.
And that's the power of app intents and app entities, because year over year, they're adding more touch points across the ecosystem of OSs, where anytime a user has the ability to interact with what your app does or your app's content outside of the app itself, app intents is the plumbing that enables that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty cool. Another feature that this is on the consumer side right now, but I think it's a window into the future. So are you familiar with the Shortcuts app?
Only for what you told me last time.
Yeah, it's been around for quite a while, several years.
I feel like I actually probably do use it somewhere.
It's really powerful, but really geeky. Like you can create these really powerful automations, but you need to think like a programmer and snap together action blocks and worry about types, and it's definitely a power user feature. They added a new call model block this year to the Shortcuts app, and there's a model selector in that action block, and there's only 3 choices. There's the local language model, which we talked about. There's ChatGPT, which has continued to get integrated across iOS in more ways.
Mm-hmm.
And the third option, which is really interesting, is private cloud compute, which was part of their story last year of, we're spinning up these new data centers with servers powered by Apple Silicon, and the architecture is completely private and anonymized. And, it all sounded really cool, but there was never a clear answer of how a query got routed to private cloud compute. It was just sort of hand wavy of, the system will decide, like, if the on-device model is capable or if it needs to send it out. And that's all it was. This is the first time a user can explicitly call out to private cloud compute. To our conversation a minute ago, there's no parameters or details or specifics around what model it's talking to, but you get to say, send it to big powerful server model. And that's really interesting. So that's a consumer feature right now in the Shortcuts app. There's no programmatic way to do that, but I think I'd be shocked if that doesn't come in the next year of updates.
Well, and the great thing is that once they have this API framework to, to access the foundation model. Once they have the foundation model framework, they can just implement that at that layer. And
Totally.
suddenly every application can get access to it.
Yeah. Perhaps there's like a premium sort of tier around those calls when they do unveil it of, as a developer, you get X free calls per month,
Right.
but pricing scales, they do that with a number of APIs. Like they have a weather API that
Oh,
you
interesting.
get free calls and over a limit. That's something to watch out for. But you're right. It makes total sense to just bake that fork in the road into the foundations model framework. And suddenly a developer isn't dealing with servers or API keys or worrying about sending customer data off device, because they can kind of stand behind the Apple stamp of, we're doing this in a way that is private by design. So that's another piece that I wanted to mention. The last bucket is around developer tooling. And so last year at DubDub, they announced a feature called Swift Assist, which was vague in details, but it was a large language model chatbot thing built into Xcode, and it's coming later this year. That was another feature that sort of just never came to fruition, at least last year, like they said. So in the new version of Xcode, they've really sort of expanded the scope of this feature, and it's actually shipping now. I haven't used it because you need to run the beta of macOS in order to access it in Xcode. And I'm not about to risk my main main compute, so that's sort of a bummer. But from what I understand about it is, it has the context of your whole project. It has an OpenAI integration baked in, and it's multimodal. So you can, from what I understand, it's very cursor like. You can drop in a sketch and get Swift UI code back. But the most interesting and surprising feature about it is that in the settings, you can actually bring your own model. So you can drop in Anthropic API keys if you want to use Claude, or there's plumbing to be able to leverage a local model, which is cool too. So it's like they're definitely playing catch up in that area, but the fact that it's baked into Xcode and already in this version, like it's BYO-Model and not just constrained to ChatGPT is super cool. So I'm excited to try that.
Very interesting. Yeah, no, it looks like they know what they're doing and they're forging ahead on full thrusters everywhere. Just they hadn't quite gotten there yet.
Yeah, totally. You mentioned a few minutes ago about the difference between the researchers and productizing
The engineers. Yeah.
and that sort of disconnect. So you may be familiar with this guy, John Giandrea, who was he was a big Google executive. I think he was involved in Google Mind or one of those Deep Mind.
Well,
is that a thing?
It was called Google Brain. There was Google. Yeah.
Deep
Mind, I think, is the current incarnation of it.
Okay, so he was a big Google executive ML researcher type, and Apple poached him in 2018 to run their new AI/ML group, and the narrative around that was like, finally they're going to fix Siri, right? That didn't happen, but as part of the fallout of the delay of this stuff, Apple just a month or two ago went through a pretty major reorg, and they basically took all of the consumer-facing productized AI/ML stuff out of the purview of the AI/ML group and moved it over to software engineering.
Uh-huh.
And my understanding is that from a reorg perspective, that affected like many thousands of people, and it's a pretty big shift internally, and we've yet to see the outcome of that, but he's still sticking around and focusing on researchy stuff. But there is that sort of cultural dissonance between researchers and product folks, and
Yes.
that sort of played out there in a pretty big way.
I think it's going to be interesting to see how it continues to play out, because it's certainly one thing to be able to take a model and do something with it, and people are getting better and better at doing that. It's a little more difficult to kind of direct your research in a particular direction because the engineering, the product side needs that, as opposed to pure research. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out and where each side steers the other. And I'll be honest, I don't think there are too many companies that can do that. And Apple is probably one of the best at saying, here is what our product needs. How do we get there? Google, less so. Google's AI team is certainly some of the best in terms of research, but I'm not sure they quite get the product side. Everyone else, I think, it also runs on just about everything, except for OpenAI, which somehow figured out how to build a product out of a research project, and they're benefiting from it.
Speaking of OpenAI, there's also this plot line, which I'm sure you are aware of, but Jony Ive, the former head of design
Yes.
of Apple for many, many years, is now building some mystery hardware device with them. So, that's pretty major too, in terms of.
I think the most interesting part of that is that they've said it's not glasses.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, okay, if you've taken the most interesting device off the table, you've now limited it to what? A speaker competitor? Okay. We're a little oversaturated on that front right now, but sure. A pin? Yeah, we saw how well that went. So, I don't know. I'm curious and pessimistic. I think this is actually a case where OpenAI is saying we need a product, and we don't know how to, we don't know what that means.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure Jony Ive can just sweep in and say, here's a product. I don't think it's going to work that way.
Yeah, it's one thing at WWDC this year was that Apple did double down on their OpenAI partnership, and it's integrated more deeply across the OSs in more and more features. So, that's a collision waiting to happen when suddenly OpenAI is competing at a hardware level with Apple. The dynamics between all these big companies are sort of wild at this
It's
moment.
always weird, though. It's always, because they work together on a number of things, and then they suddenly diverge. They're one of the things that I kind of like about the big tech companies in general is that they see themselves as rivals. They're not enemies, they're rivals. And sometimes you need to work with your rival so that you get ahead. And yeah, if it means your rival also gets ahead, that's fine. And we've seen that over and over. We saw it in the birth of Chrome, that Chrome came out of Safari, and and the work that Apple had done there. And they played together nicely for many, many years before they started going their separate ways.
Mm.
So it wouldn't surprise me if we see that again with OpenAI. We saw, I mean, the most notable example of that was Bill Gates suddenly showing up on screen at an Apple announcement. Nobody thought that would ever happen.
You're talking about the one in the 90s.
Yeah.
The infamous one. Yeah.
Nobody thought that Bill Gates and Steve Jobs would ever talk to each other again, and yet they did.
I think even Apple has alluded to this, but there's also been some rumors around it that, even though ChatGPT is the only system integration right now, that's not intended to be exclusive over time. And it seems like there's a Gemini partnership there that just hasn't come to fruition yet.
I was going to say there were rumors leading up to WWDC that Gemini was suddenly going to make an appearance on stage, and I'm like, whatever. It's another model. My hope is that as over time, we're just going to start saying, okay, what's the best model for this job, and we're going to use it, and we're going to see the big companies kind of embracing that. We've sort of seen that even inside Google and Microsoft with Azure. Yeah, Google is pushing Gemini and they're pushing Gemma, but Anthropic is right there. DeepSeek is right there. Meta is right there. So I think everyone's beginning to say, look, we're going to give you the best tools for the job. And then Google and Meta are also saying, but we're also going to be putting research into this to make sure that we are players in this game and not just a pawn of somebody else. Apple's definitely going to be doing some as well. So great perspective on what's going on inside the Apple universe.
A lot of it is still a little future-y, but I think they learned their lesson compared to last year, and sort of, there was less hand wavy. This is coming and it's going to be great, and more here are these new, concrete APIs that you can start using. I think it was a good year, and all of the stuff they announced last year, even though it hasn't shipped, the documentation and stuff around those APIs are still there. So at least at this point, they haven't said, never mind. Like, they are still working on it, but maybe next time, maybe next time we chat, we'll see if any of this has come true.
Well, I look forward to hearing reports as stuff comes available and as you get a chance to play with it. Look forward to hearing what other folks think about what Apple is doing. And if you've got a chance to play with it, feel free to leave comments below or find us on LinkedIn. And as we get to play with this some more, we'll have you back on to talk about it on Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs.
Take care.
Yeah, take care. Thanks, Alan.